Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Fish Room. Today I thought I would discuss a topic that I feel many within our community may not have a full understanding or comprehension of, and that's selective breeding, and how it applies not only to ornamental fish, but in some cases can apply to critically endangered fish. So stick around and I'll share some ideas and share with you some of my husbandry and how I've developed some of my bloodlines over the years. So let's get started. The first part that most people understand with selective breeding is how it applies to ornamental fish. Selective breeding has been utilized to create different bloodlines and strains of ornamental fish over the years. Selective breeding is used for physical morphology, whether it be working with a specific color, body shape, or finnage. So working with ornamentals, selective breeding works with physical morphology. So to give a good example, years ago I used to breed guppies. And I worked with a lot of different strains, and I was working with a blue delta strain. And over a period of time I started seeing a few males and even a few females that were sometimes really expressing a different color than the normal blues. And this is normal when working with genetics. At any given time, a mutation or a different color can express itself. It's what we choose to do to allow it to manifest within the bloodline. So I started picking out and selecting these fish that were showing different colors. And over time, I developed a bloodline that I called the Royal Delta Blue bloodline. And I was circulating them through the community. But what I found happen, which is what I find happens with a lot of guppy strains and even any ornamental strains, a lot of times when you're working with a bloodline that is set for a specific, whether it's color, finnage, or whatever, most people are not following what your standard practice for culling is. In other words, what I mean by that is, I was only selecting fish that I thought represented the direction I wanted this line to go. I wasn't just putting a name to a fish and then whatever they produced, I was selling as that. When you're working with strains of fish, you want to cull and select and choose to breed the fish that represent what that strain means. I'll use another example, and this one's pretty current. Many of you know that Greg Sage is someone who I've confided in for many years. He is a mentor. A lot of you know that he selectively breeds Green Dragon Plecos. And there are a lot of people offering these fish in the community. But let's pay attention to something. Are you really producing green dragons? One of the things I'm going to recommend that you do is I'm going to put a link in my description for the video from Greg that explains what exactly represents a green dragon. What I have found over the years with a lot of people producing this fish, they've received their fish from Greg, which are green dragons. He will only sell green dragons as green dragons if they represent what qualities he's looking for in this fish. So you're receiving green dragons, but if you're not culling for what this fish represents, over time you're diminishing the line and you're not producing green dragons. You could be producing a lot of different offshoots of a hybridized fish that has been worked for specific qualities. For instance, the lines of green dragon started with the L338 and an albino common bristlenose. From that, Greg has been working with these fish for over 15 years, and to this very day, that bloodline is still not truly set. It takes many generations. So, at last time I talked to him, he said 40, if close to 50% of the fish he was producing at that time represented what a green dragon line should be. The other half wasn't, and he calls for that. He's the ones that do not represent what he feels is a green dragon. He is not breeding them, and he is not dispersing them as green dragons. So what I'm saying, it's not that you've bought these green dragons from Greg Sage. You also have to follow the culling and selective breeding standards that represent that line. With all due respect, if you are not doing that, you're not helping to redevelop and strengthen the line, and over time the line will just implode and not represent green dragons at all. I could go into talking about what exactly a green dragon is and represents, but I don't like to speak for my friend, so I will leave that link there for you to listen and get right from his mouth. What I recommend, anytime you're getting a fish, an ornamental fish from a specific breeder, and it's labeled as their strain, such as Greg Sage with any of his strains, or any of the other breeders out there, and I'm sorry, there's so many, and most of them right now just aren't coming to mind. But if there's a breeder that has a specific line of fish, the only way you can categorize that you are breeding that line of fish is if you are maintaining the true representation of what that bloodline is. So that's Greg Sage's line of green dragons. A green dragon has a slight leucistic hue to it that has like a yellowish hue. And when he was in my fish room, he showed me what the green dragons he had sent me. If you pass a flashlight over, you will get a green hue to it, or sometimes just with the right light, you'll get a green hue. If you do not have that green hue, and you don't have the fins that represent, that is not a green dragon. Again, I'll allow Greg to explain it better for you with the link I put in the description. This applies to all ornamental fish. So if you're breeding guppies and you're breeding a particular strain and you got them from someone that developed these lines, ask that breeder, what exactly does this line represent? What do you look for in culling, and what do you remove from the line so it's not breeding to maintain what you have? There are a lot of breeders that will share that information with you. It's not just getting a fish from someone's bloodline and breeding offspring and saying that it's their bloodline. That's not how it works. When these folks developed a bloodline, they had certain things in mind. When I was breeding my royal blue delta guppies, it wasn't just a blue guppy with delta fins. It represented quality, the deep color of what I considered the royal blue. But another thing I did, which is very prominent in guppies, I was not only breeding for the color representation, I was breeding for body structure. What does that mean? At the adipose, at this body region right before the tail, that helps support the tail, a lot of people that are not culling properly, that adipose gets very thin and frail. And what we see happening are fish that swim awkward and can't carry the weight of their tails. So there were a lot of different things. That was one aspect, not just visual but physical, that I used. And I shared that with people, and whether they chose to follow my standards for culling, that was their choice. But there were a lot of people producing my royal blue guppies that they were not my line of royal blue guppies. They were just a blue guppy. So I hope that I've explained that enough. So what I recommend, in all honesty, if you're getting a bloodline of fish from someone that has them listed and categorized as a particular strain that they have been breeding over time as their representation of that fish, by all means ask that person what this line represents and what qualities did they look for. That is how you maintain a strained bloodline from a particular breeder. If you are not doing that, all you are doing is producing fish for a bloodline that over time, because if people are breeding them willy-nilly and they're being flooded into the market in our community, over time we're destroying that work, all that work. A prime example, and I mean no disrespect to any of my friends, I know some of you are breeding green dragons, and that's great because Greg has worked very hard to set these bloodlines. But understand, at 15 years, Greg still has not fully set this bloodline. Again, as last I talked to him, he was up to about 50% of what he was producing would be categorized as green dragons. Within what he was producing and seeing, a portion of them were albino or leucistic, other portions were short fins, but they were not the 100% reproduction of green dragons. He also talks about fin age, color, body structure. This is what he represents as a green dragon. The ones that he calls green dragons are exactly what he wants them to be. He's very strict on what he breeds and what he puts out in the community. So to those of you who are working with his green dragons and you want to truly maintain that green dragon bloodline, I recommend either watching the video or reach out to him so you understand exactly what he was looking for. But understand again, this line after 15 years is not fully set. So if you're not calling for the representation of what is a green dragon, no disrespect, all you're doing is producing a plecostomus, which is actually a hybridization from an L338 and a common albino bristlenose that also had a few other genetic things. You're not producing anything spectacular. You're not creating a new species. What you are doing is developing a physiological morph of these fish that represents that strain or strain. So there's a difference between bloodline and strain. Strain is when you're developing characteristics over time that you feel enhance or make a species better. So if you're not following the techniques of these breeders and you're just breeding these fish arbitrarily, you're not maintaining the strain. That's the difference. This applies to all ornamental fish or any fish that you are changing the physical morphology, be it color, body structure, or fin, anything that you're physically wanting to change within a line. But know the direction that you're going and follow accordingly and cull accordingly so that you can maintain that strain. Hope that helps. I hope I explained that fairly well. So next I want to discuss critically endangered fish. Okay, so I know some of you are like, what's he talking about selective breeding of critically endangered fish? Why is he mentioning that? There's a different aspect to selective breeding other than just producing color morphs or different types of physical morphology. You can also use selective breeding to strengthen a bloodline. So allow me to use myself as an example again. A few years back, I received a species of Scyphia that I had waited quite a while to start working with, and I was really excited when I got them. And they were doing great, they looked great, and eating well, and their color, they were just beautiful. Then they dropped their first drops of fry. What did I notice? That was within these Scyphia, although the parents were nice and healthy, some of the offspring in the bloodline were showing physical genetic defects. Crooked spines, mal-shaped body structure, definite genetic defects. Well, of course, I'm not going to produce genetic defects, so what did I do? I culled the genetic defects, or the ones that were weak and frail and that I did not feel that was the true representation of the species. I didn't just do it one time. For the next 2 years, I culled from all of the drops that I received from those colonies. Over 2 years' time, I culled over 8 drops over time. And at this time, it may still have, it has receded greatly, but what I've done by selectively breeding over time the stronger of the lines, I am slowly eradicating that defect. So when I say selectively breeding critically endangered fish, trust me, I agree with everyone. You don't want to physically change the structure of the fish. You don't want to change color. You don't want to change body structure things. You want to maintain those fish at how they represent in nature if they are critically endangered fish. I absolutely agree. So with that being said, there's one little tidbit I want to go offline with a little bit here and discuss. It's a touchy situation, but I just want to bring it to everyone's attention. Greg Sage selectively breeds trout goodid, Iliodon furcidens, and he's breeding them for a brighter color. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, but I've had people come in and say, well, you know what, I like Greg, but I don't like that he selectively breeds trout goodid. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. All you have to do is go on the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and it will give you a list of what animals in the world are considered critically endangered. Iliodon furcidens is not a critically endangered fish. He has never worked, nor will he ever, selectively breed or line breed for any types of morphology, critically endangered fish. And he makes that abundantly clear in his videos. He's developing more yellow color, but he's doing it in a fish that is not of concern for conservation. So what does that mean? Respectfully, if you folks have a problem with this, and that is your choice, but what you're telling me, is you don't just have a problem with him creating a more vivid color in trout goodeids. What you're telling me, not only that, is that if you're having that trouble with trout goodeids, then you have a problem with people that develop different color lines of the common guppy, the fantail guppy. The common guppies are not really. There are some species of guppies that are endangered, and those are the ones you protect. But the species that they're working with in color morphs is not a critically endangered fish. There are zoophorus species of swordtails and platies that are not critically endangered. They're the ones that represent a lot of the color morphs and strains we see in our community today. So if you are telling me you have a problem with someone developing color on a fish that is not critically endangered, you're now telling me you have a problem with people doing that with all of them. So what I would say, before you make an assumption that someone's doing something nefarious, truly understand that they're not critically endangered. And I'm 100% certain that if that ever came, Greg would stop doing what he's doing. But here's the thing, he's not injuring the bloodline. It's not, to me, it's not doing much harm, because what I think we need to focus more on in our community is how people are continually breeding unconfirmed bloodlines of critically endangered fish. In other words, they're not keeping the ESUs. They're not maintaining the collection point data. And over time, with some of these fish, you can hybridize. That's the real problem, not someone developing a little bit more color in a fish that is not critically endangered and is plentiful in the wild and is of no concern, is of least concern. You know, it's like, let's pick our battles, folks. Because, like I said, if you're saying that, you're telling me you have a problem with our community that develops all these color morphs of zoophorus species, of platies and swords. That's no different in my eyes. And I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm just trying to give you an opinion and my perspective. But I will 100% agree there is no room for morphism within critically endangered fish. But what I do is concentrate on selecting nice size females, robust females, nice males with good body structure. And if they do have color, as long as it's not some wild color I'm trying to develop, I'm just sticking within the color representation of the species. I'm not going to lie, I will take a darker red sometimes before I take the lighter. But I'm not developing anything that's a different color strain. You know, I'm developing body structure and appearance in conservation in critically endangered fish that maintain the bloodlines and make them stronger. But I'm not just doing that visually. I am culling out any genetic defects and over time removing them from the line, because that genetic line is no longer allowing to breed with those flaws. It takes many generations to do this sometimes. I just recently had a gentleman in my fish room, Miki Tobler. Some of you may have seen the pictures and stuff I shared. Great guy. I mean, just a field researcher that does not put on airs. He welcomes conversation. Really nice guy. And we were talking here in my fish room. He said, Ed, I'm really impressed with what you're doing. And in the upcoming weeks, I'm getting another bloodline of Cracodon audax El Tabasso, the Black Prince. And the reason I'm doing this, you may have noticed this year I haven't put out into the community a lot of Black Prince. To be honest, I've done none. My bloodline has, although they're not showing physical defects, they're not producing like they should. So I feel I need to introduce another line, but I'm not just going to put them together. So I was telling Miki what I plan to do. This other confirmed bloodline of El Tabasso, I will be isolating for up to a year and monitoring the drops of fry that they produce. And the reason I'm doing that, I know my bloodline is showing no physical defects. I haven't had physical defects in this line also. I believe it to be a strong line. I just think it needs a little jump start for reproduction. The new bloodline I'm getting, I don't know the genetic history. I know the gentleman that I'm getting them from. I know they are confirmed fish, but I have never seen some of the offspring produced. And I'm not saying that this person is sending me something that I have to be cautious of. I just do this with every fish. If I have fish that a line of fish I've been working in my fish room for a number of years, I don't immediately bring in another line of that species and introduce them, because what it could be doing is damage to the work I've done. So, for instance, my El Tabasso just aren't producing enough. So I think I need to reintroduce new blood to the line. But if I came in and immediately introduced those to each other, I don't know what possible defects could be in this bloodline, and then now I've just polluted my bloodline. So for about a year, sometimes 2 years, I will not merge any of these lines till I'm 100% sure I'm certain that I don't have a big issue with genetics, with genetic defects. The line of Scyphia that I've been working with for the last few years to eradicate the defect, I'm now on my 4th year, and I'm just now getting really nice size Scyphia and also producing great numbers, and their colors are back. I feel like I've restored that line, but I'm still wanting another 2 drops or so before I offer them in the community. But you can eradicate these defects. But just remember, just putting fish from different people all together, especially when you've had a bloodline, for instance, my Doadroi. I've been working with my Doadroi for 7 years. My Doadroi produce beautiful specimens. But let's say I need to add a new line for a little variance in genetics. But I may take fish from someone else who the fish look fine, but somewhere in their history there's a genetic defect. And if I just immediately put them with my fish, I take a great chance of polluting my bloodline. So that's why I keep them separate for at least a few generations, just to make sure that they're not showing any types of physical deformities. And then I slowly introduce them. So when I'm doing that, folks, that is a form of selective breeding. It's not creating a color morph or long flowing fins or a different body structure. It's selectively breeding strong specimens of a species. So that is the difference with selective breeding with critically endangered fish and then selectively breeding fish for the ornamental hobby. Another thing that would apply that I didn't mention with ornamentals, just like I just said that I breed a bloodline that I just get in my fish room for a couple generations to make sure what's going on, I do the same with ornamentals. Because if you have an ornamental fish, like I said, that you've been breeding for many years and you're setting the line, but you found another bloodline of that species that is similar to what you have and you want to strengthen, you could inadvertently be introducing genetic defects. So it's always good to see what that bloodline drops in their fry, in their young, and then making sure that you're not producing genetic defects over time. So this is the difference with selective breeding. So let's sum up with what I just said. Selective breeding is a couple of things. For ornamental fish, it's a representation in physical or visual morphology, being a color, body structure, or finnage. If you're not continuing to selectively breed those fish that have those visual traits for that strain, over time you're not producing these strains, you're undeveloping them. And over time they'll be lost. I used the Green Dragon as the perfect representation of this. It applies with all fish that are working in the ornamental hobby that people are developing color morphs and body structures. You need to maintain that line, and how you maintain that line is understand what represents that strain. Now let's talk about conservation one last time to just reiterate what I've said. I 100% agree with those that say we cannot selectively breed for body structure, color morphs, or any type of physical morphology in critically endangered fish. I am 100% on board with you. But we can selectively breed by picking the strongest of these fish and breeding them, and inadvertently we can be strengthening these lines, but also eradicating genetic defects. Those are the difference. So thank you for watching. I hope I shined a little bit of light into selective breeding. What I would recommend in finalizing this video, if you're working with ornamental fish, especially fish such as the Green Dragon Plecos, reach out to the breeder, the actual breeder that was developing that line, and say, what were you doing to cull and selectively breed this line to maintain it or make it better? And follow their instruction. Again, if you're not doing that and you're just breeding them willy-nilly, all you're doing is producing a fish. Critically endangered fish, understand that selective breeding is not morphology. It's just strengthening the line and eradicating any genetic defects. So thank you for taking the time to allow me to share this information with you. I welcome your comments, your thoughts in the comments below. Should you have any more questions on any of this and you feel the need to reach out to me, you can do so via this channel or through my Facebook page or even my website, and I'll put those links right on here. Thanks so much for listening, folks, and I'll talk to you soon.